So most people have, you guys have seen me on this channel lots of times. Nobody cares about me, but in case you haven't, my name is Mike Tuñez. I am the studio developer lead here at Firelock Games, and at least on my screen down below there is Eric Hansen. Well, that's going to be super confusing. I got to pause that because I had it streaming on it. Okay, sorry. Anyway, Eric Hansen, who is the author and the game designer for Blood and Crowns, the game that we currently have running on Kickstarter right now. In fact, I just realized Ray's also here. Ray's in the back. Nobody can see Ray.
Hello.
All right.
So Ray's going to be looking through the chat and making sure everyone behaves. And also, Ray, if you could go ahead and throw up a link, if you don't mind, please, on the description of this, which I should have done. But we had some technical difficulties right before we started, as usual. So I was scrambling, trying to get everything working. We tested this on my iPad before, and it worked perfect. And of course, I went today, and it didn't let me share the stream with Eric. So I had to. Eric had the bright idea of trying it on the phone. That worked. So thank goodness we're here. We didn't have to reschedule it. So. We're all good though. So Ray's putting that link. So if you're not aware, if you're just somehow not aware of this and you're just stumbling through here, the link to the Kickstarter is now mentioned there. But Eric, go ahead and introduce yourself. Say something to the people here, if you don't mind, please.
Oh, of course. I'm Eric Hansen. I kind of refer to myself more as a developer of the rules because I got to give Mike credit. As you all know, the base system. He designed that, so I developed them for the 100 Years War. What's that? Oh, here we're gonna have a modesty off here in a second. But I guess if you don't know me, I've been gaming since the mid '80s. I cut my teeth on the red box set of D&D. Got into historical gaming in the mid '90s. Yada yada yada. Met Mike and the Firelock crew when they came up to Orlando with the original Kickstarter. Popped it on a table and gave us a quick preview, and then they kept coming to the shows with it, and we kind of got to know them. And then a couple of years ago, I was running, I think I said a few conventions in a row. I was running a series of 100 Years War games, and then after one of which I was talking to Mike, and then next thing I know, I'm in a designer group, like as ostensibly to offer my input. And then I happened to ask, is anybody developing for 100 Years War? He said, now they are, and here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward. Of course, then COVID hit, and then everything kind of went on pause. And then, here we are. That's kind of in a nutshell. I don't know if I'm sure people, if they have any specific questions, they will drop it in there.
And I'll preemptively answer the first question because it's not readily apparent thanks to my beard falling apart. But Eric is much older than I am. Just want to make sure that's clear as we start. So anyway, we can go ahead and jump into these questions. So we've got some questions that we've put together here, and I think we'll start with, I think it's probably best we start with the Kickstarter related questions. We'll go from there. I was thinking maybe jumping back and forth to the ones that are more directed to you, Eric, but I think let's get the boring ones out of the way first. Right. So, because I can knock these out pretty quick. These are all pretty easy. So,
okay.
First question is...
I'm going to grab glasses while you do that. And then
sure. Yeah, I can see it, Ray. Thanks. I told you I had it. Will there be late pledges for the Kickstarter? Yes. There will be late pledges. So one of the cool things we're doing in this Kickstarter is as soon as we are technologically able to, meaning we're able to upload everything and get it where we could distribute it to you all, the book is pretty much ready to go. So as soon as the project's over, you will have a PDF available to you to get that, right? So now for late pledges, it's a trickier thing from what we've seen so far. So it may be a kind of thing where once a week we populate a list that goes out to everybody and you get your books, but we haven't totally figured that out yet. But either way, you'll get the PDF stuff as sooner than later if you late pledge. So that's the answer to that is yes, it's going to be on BackerKit as of now. We've got that all set up, although another company has really insisted on talking to me, so we'll see what happens. But for now, BackerKit. Anyway, how will you handle shipping? So we are still open to other options. I've got a few feelers out there to try to make shipping a little easier for people in Europe, but I didn't want that to hold up the project, as we've got a lot of other projects on the tail of this one. As of right now, it's all shipping from here, from Firelock HQ. So as soon as the project ends, the book is pretty much going to print immediately. And as soon as it gets here, which we're expecting January, just to play it safe, uh, with the holidays and everything, that's probably pretty likely. But once it gets here, we're gonna start the day it arrives. We're gonna break those suckers open and start shipping them out. So if you were part of our last Kickstarter, everything that we shipped from here pretty much was all done in what 2 weeks, Ray, more or less, maybe 2.5 weeks,
Yeah.
with some straggling stuff. Yeah, so it should the once we get it, it should go out pretty quick. Um, Next question, even though it's on here twice, that's confusing. Anyway, estimated delivery date, like I said, is January for anything physical. Anything not physical, PDFs will pretty much be within days of the project finishing. I'm hoping that it'd be awesome if we could do it like within the same day, but then we have the issues of cards that go bad in Kickstarter. So it'll probably be about a week, I would say. But anyway, um, then so next question: what can we expect the next unlock? So that is going to go up pretty soon. So as soon as we hit that goal, we're going to post it. We threw up our loading as a placeholder for the moment, because we had another stretch goal in mind, which was going to be just a box to put anybody who got the magnets here can get a box and get it all night in one nice box with all your stuff. And we thought that would be cool, but in hindsight, we decided that that's kind of boring, and also it only would be an unlock for the magnet tier. Nobody would have access to it, so we wanted to make sure everybody else had access to stuff. So we decided to do another STL model, since the other ones are all mostly done. Um, and that's going to be for John Crab. So we have no art for that yet, as we just decided to do it suddenly. And realistically, what were we thinking? We really should have the one pirate in the book. Obviously, we need to do that guy. So we're going to do an STL file for John Crab. All right. Next question: are the STLs formatted for only 28mm? What material or what type of material are they formatted in mind? So these are formatted in mind for resin printing, not for extrusion style. I always mess up my name. SLA. SLA is what we're looking at here. So I don't know if it'll work on another one. We can try that and see, but there's a lot of pretty fine detail on there, because that's kind of what we're shooting for. And they are scaled as 28s, pretty much same size as the rest of the Firelock miniatures. So you've seen anything from our Blood and Plunder range, they're kind of big 28s, not quite 32s, they're kind of like 30s. That's not a real scale though, I guess. So they kind of vary. Some of them are a little smaller. We try to throw some realism in there. So some people are smaller than others, some are bigger. So right around that size. But these all pretty much are about 30s. They will be, but of course, being 3D printing, you could scale them up and down, and it should be okay for the most part. Probably not down too much, but going up, you shouldn't have any issues, unless you're trying to print it one scale or something. But next question: will the STLs be available for purchase after the Kickstarter? Yes, they will, and there's probably going to be a lot more on that front, not just for this project, but for other things. So we're currently in talks with my mini factory and looking at some other things as well. So there'll be more STL files coming from us in the future, but we are still working on the details of that. But yes is the answer. All right, and from there, that is it. So we've got some live stream questions, but we'll go back to those. So for now, I'll jump over to Eric and let him go ahead and answer some game related stuff.
All right, thanks, Mike. Pardon me. So for the first question, for the various armies in the rulebook, what is the earliest faction in it? What is the latest? The earliest is probably the Scottish Wars of Independence. there's a list for roughly early 14th century, technically before the Hundred Years' War started. So you can kind of dabble on that side. The latest official list covers the Loire campaign, which is, of course, Joan of Arc's big thing, where she took the Dauphin to Reims. You could probably extend the list easily to the end of the war. I had to do a lot of editing, a lot of editing, because I wanted to get y'all like the core everything. So there's a couple absentees. So some of the stuff like in the later period where like gunpowder has been a huge question online. And I don't know if there's a specific question, so I won't go too far into that. But and there's some like mercenary units, like such as the Milanese cavalry and stuff like that, aren't in the Loire campaign list, but all of the basics are there, so you can take it all the way through the bulk of the war. Can I do amphibious assault battles in the game? Yes, I just don't include any scenarios. There really wasn't. I think there was one battle on a beach, and it just happened to be that they followed these people back to their ship. There really wasn't any kind of contested landings. Even when I think with Henry V, when he landed at Harfleur, when he was about to do the siege of Harfleur, the French knew he was coming. They knew he was building up, and they still missed the landing. So, in any case, but the rules are there. So, if you know, again, part of it too is in the context of a six part or six turn game. There's nothing, there's no artillery, so it's just a lot of just like paddle, 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 paddle. So you don't have that back and forth like you do in Blood and Plunder. That being said, I did include all the rules. So if you want to do like a longer game and run your own scenarios and do some narrative scenarios, which I highly encourage, you can definitely extend the game length and put those elements in there. How would you compare ship battles and Blood and Crowns to Blood and Plunder? The biggest difference is there's no ship killing weapons. You can burn ships down, and that is obviously an option. I think it's an option in Blood and Plunder too. Generally, you don't want to do it on the ship you're on, but generally speaking. But then the addition of the castles actually has a pretty decent effect, because if you have units in the castles, they get they get like heavy cover, and they also have some defensive capabilities that aren't available if you're like say midships. And so that adds a little bit of a dynamic. And it's very much like in the period, they were basically land battles on water. So it's like shoot, 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 and then board. So a lot of it comes down to how you want to align your ships, where your castle is compared to oriented to their ship, and you want to make sure you're timing that contact just right, so you're not hitting a fresh ship. And that's kind of where the strategy comes in there.
Yeah.
What mechanics are in the game that are different from others in the Blood and game system? Okay, so it's closest to Blood and Plunder. Say again?
That's quite a few.
Yeah, I'll hit the wave tops on this one, because it's a lot of. I think I think it was a Dead Man's Chest, and I apologize if it was Plunder Den or if it was somebody else who said it, but they kind of referred to it as a 1.5 rules of Blood and Plunder, because I have the advantage of having years of the community, sharpening these rules and getting feedback and refining it. So I kind of formalized some stuff that's kind of like that's along like in the rules, like, and kind of organized it a slightly different, little tweaks there. But the biggest differences are probably these top five. We'll give you the top five biggest differences. The first is the initiative hand now is based on the number of units under control of one player. So the highest number of units. So if you have a player that's got 5 units in their command and the other one's controlling 4, the hand size is 5. So everybody would draw 5 cards, and one of those cards would be your pass. So you get a little bit of tactical flexibility if you're running a smaller army. You get to adapt, and it kind of balances it out in a later game too. If you're getting kind of hammered and you start losing units. The next thing is this is probably the biggest development / design challenge is passive armor. So I think it's like in Blood and Plunder, how you have your armor value, or your save value for shooting occurs when you're in terrain, and then there's a 9 up outside of terrain. Well, obviously in the medieval period, your armor is going with you no matter where you go. So that's a big difference. So you're going to get a lot, like for example, like the men-at-arms, your best men-at-arms units has a 5 up save, and it just follows them, and then it can be improved with cover. And along with that also too is because I had to do the cover different, it kind of follows more the Blood and Valor model, where you'll have like light and heavy cover. And I also, if you are defending cover, you'll get the cover save for the first round of combat. So if you're in woods or something like that and you get charged, you'll be able to take that cover of that woods for that first round of melee. So that's kind of adds another little element too. Third thing, and this is kind of a fun one. I've not seen anybody exploit it too detrimentally. I almost got my buddy Leon with it in one game. Is you have the concept of an impetuous charge. So especially the French, if you activate a cavalry unit, and you basically your first two actions, if you can, you must attempt to contact the closest unit. And then the esquires have a rule. Well, they'll not only will they try to charge the closest unit, they'll try to charge the closest prize. Well, you get a bonus 6. The 6 differences, but so that kind of adds a little dynamic. Is that the cavalry it can hit pretty hard, but you can also draw them in and kind of pull them off balance. Defensive reactions. So I think in Blood and Plunder, everybody's familiar with, or if you're familiar with Blood and Plunder, shouldn't assume everybody's played Blood and Plunder. You have when somebody charges, you can shoot. You can still do that in this in Blood and Crowns. And I've also added 2 more, and we're kind of formalize it as defensive reaction. So you'll be able to shoot. Some units will be able to evade, and others will be able to melee. So specifically your pikes. So if you charge pikes, they can take the option of taking the fatigue to do a defensive reaction, and they get to resolve their melee first, and it's fully resolved. And the reason why that's important is because one of the biggest changes, this was a collab with Mike there, is you can now fight back. And there was a kind of a discussion, I think, in the Facebook group on this. So essentially, when you get charged, there's going to be a round of combat simultaneously. So you'll apply your pull casualties and pull fatigue once both sides had a chance to attack. If the defender chooses to do so, it will cost them a fatigue, and that's kind of the catch there. So the way it works out on the table, it sounds like you're giving a lot of kind of advantage to the defender, but that fatigue builds really fast. So it becomes a really kind of hard decision. So that's an interesting dynamic, especially since it's a melee heavy game being late medieval. And then the 6th thing that's a little different, your bonus 6th is the concept of a prize. So like your leader and then like magnate leaders and stuff like that, or excuse me, some of your legendary leaders are great prizes and prizes. And prizes can be captured in the game. So if you eliminate a prize, it becomes a captive that can also be rescued. Pardon me, excuse me. So there's kind of like a game within a game, is that yes, you can use your leader. You get him a little too close to the combat, he might be captured, but then you can always effect a rescue and you get renown. And that kind of dovetails nicely into the next question, which is, how does renown work? So renown is similar to breakpoints, but it's kind of more of a positive thing. Like, so in breakpoints, you want to avoid getting breakpoints, or renown, you want to constantly be gaining renown. So you'll be doing this through the standard attrition, which if you're familiar with Blood and Plunder, if you eliminate a quarter of your enemy force, you get a renown. There'll be scenario objectives, and there'll also be some standard feats of arms. So capturing a prize, we just discussed. If you eliminate a unit completely on a charge, that gives you a renown. So the whole game kind of is revolved around, you want to build up as much renown and as possible through feats of arms. And there is a rule that if you outpace, you have so much more renown, but I think it's turn 4, then you start checking to see if your army is going to break. If the game is miniature ambiguous, how will ship combat work regarding bases? It was kind of a decision early on. I decided to leave the base size very flexible. So you can have anywhere from like a 20 to 25 millimeter base square around for your infantry. Then it's just going to depend on how many you can fit on the ship. I've been suggesting to everybody, if you're doing newer models, to do the 20 millimeter round, because you get a little more space on the ship, so you can put them on there. And it's just whoever fits. Same thing, 2 units per section. It works very similar to Blood and Plunder. I didn't want to try to monkey with that too much. Yeah, hopefully that answers that question. What are the plans for future expansions? Okay. So that's been a pretty dynamic conversation since the Kickstarter went live, and especially since the official Facebook group got going. My short list right now, today, as we speak, is I would like to cover some type of siege / gunpowder type expansion. There's a lot of interest in doing the Reconquista. which is, when I say that, I mean like the reconquest of Granada.
Mhm.
I have a tentative boundary of say 1300 to 1492. So basically right up until the Age of Sail, and that's kind of where I've been fitting it. So that takes us right through Granada. And then probably third on that list would be something maybe potentially in the Italian, in Italy, and the city-state wars, because you get Hawkwood in there. There's the Papal Schism and that kind of stuff like that. All of it's very tentative right now, so we shall see. What is your favorite faction? Why is it your favorite faction? This is the who should I play in a tournament question. So full disclosure, I came out of the gate is kind of an Anglophile. I've always been fascinated with the warbow, and you know, I grew up watching Robin Hood and all those movies, and just always had to capture my imagination. But I kind of tried to, every time I did worked on a faction, is put on that hat and really try to look at it from their perspective. So honestly, I don't have a favorite faction. I think I end up playing French more than anything else because people like to run the warbows. Um, but all of them, I can make a case for each one of them. And it was a really great opportunity to learn about all the different minor factions like Brittany and you know, really Burgundy and Aquitaine and the Gascons and all that, like how diverse France was at the time. And of course, the Iberian Peninsula, I will say, has been like the hardest one to research altogether. The second is Ireland, because that's one thing I will point out, is that Ireland is kind of grouped under the English right now. I recognize that they were their own independent. They had their own independent area in Ireland. That history is really hard to run down, and it's very tangential to the Hundred Years' War. Pretty much the pattern was somebody would go to, you know, Ireland and basically say like, "Okay, I'm going to get this place under control," and a few months would go by, and you go, "Going back to England." And he'd go back to England, leave some troops there, and you guys figure it out. So hopefully I'll circle back to them at some point too. But yeah, favorite faction.
I'll interject on that one too and say that I'm enjoying. I thought I was going to want to play French, but I'm doing the Spanish because I really love the jinetes. But uh, that's a hard model to find. So that's going to dovetail to something somebody else asked. And if we plan on continuing to do STLs, yes, I would like to do a lot more stuff like that. But at the same time, we do have we are limited. We have one sculptor, and he's dealing with a lot. So I don't know how soon, but I definitely think that, I mean, there will be some, you know, here and there. More than likely, you'll probably see some stuff. I'm pretty much pushing to get some proper jinetes for this period done. So that's double answer for you. Carry on, Eric. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jinetes have been yeah, they're a challenge to the miniatures, to say the least.
Yeah.
Actually, everything in the Iberian Peninsula, like everything that you Reconquista is always earlier, like El Cid and everything. But anyway, we can lament about that on another thread. I could go on for, oh, it's frustrating. Anyway, point I'm driving at. Where we at? Favorite faction. Okay, I hope I avoid that question. I'll go too far on that one. But were there any difficulties you found trying to balance something in playtesting? Yes, warbows. 100% warbows.
That was another question somebody asked too, about how that was, about specifically how those were balanced. So
Yes. Okay. So I'll kind of reiterate something I said on an interview recently. The way the warbows fall, there's basically three categories of archers in the game right now. You're going to have your warbows, which are your English and your Welsh. And the way they're going to work is they're going to have to basically ready. And once they're readied, they have to remain stationary, and then they can kind of shoot. They will be able to have the option of shooting twice a turn, that kind of stuff. But that's kind of their thing. Now, it's an interesting thing because I spend a lot of time looking at videos of longbows and warbows and everything like that. And one of the things I noticed is, if you ever watch Joe Gibbs shoot his longbow, excuse me, his warbow, on the Todd's Workshop videos, it's a much more deliberate thing. And especially when you factor in the idea that what I really kind of worked into this was, we're in a skirmish scenario, not like in a battle scenario. So it's a big difference between shooting at a mass target and just dumping arrows, as opposed to trying to pick somebody off. Now, that being said, there's a neat little rule that I'm very happy with now, the way it's settled.
Mhm.
For the way Aerostorm works with warbows is you're going to start off with an ammo marker, and there's a gamble built in there. You'll have the option of doing, you'll get some bonus dice if you decide to pull that ammo marker. You throw it to the side. You're going to get some extra dice for any attack you do on that activation. The downside is you can now only shoot with half that unit for the remainder of the game. And what this is meant to capture is that, like, if you look at a lot of the battles, and I know I just said we're doing skirmish, not battle, but we're trying to capture some of the flavor. So bear with me. Is that you'll see a lot of times like the archers will run out of arrows, and it's usually because they'll just go all for broke, and they would fire, and then they become light infantry. So especially your English veterans are very good at light infantry. Like they can actually fight in melee relatively decent. Not as quite as obviously as good as the men at arms, but you figure later in the game, you're getting in those late turns, units have a lot of fatigue and everything, so they can dump their arrows and then charge into the fight and try to capture that flavor a little bit. So that was probably the toughest. Armor worked out nice. Again, collaborating with Mike, we kind of came up with you're going to get extra dice on if you decide to upgrade your armor, and then you'll also be able to convert some casualties to fatigue if you want to. If you continue to upgrade. What is the status of siege engines in the game? Yeah, they're in here. There's a lot of rules in here. The original book had a whole section on fortifications and artillery and all that. I had to edit it out. It's incredibly hard. It's a very big curveball to throw at the game, and I was realizing it's fun, but I think it's really more for like narrative play.
And not enough time to play test it properly, really. Yeah.
100%. And that's kind of why I said earlier, I see it as an expansion. I'd like to cover, I did skip one more expansion. I forgot War of the Roses, but
yes,
but with the fortifications,
War of the Roses is easy jump. So
it's very easy, with the one minor exception is the gunpowder. That I've got to work the gunpowder in there somehow. That's we'll hold that thought because I'm sure a gunpowder will come up at some point. But yeah, so siege engines, it's in my mind. I'm working out some rules. This community is already taken off, and I'm like a little overwhelmed, to be perfectly honest. It's a lot to take in the last few weeks, but I love it. So what I may do is kind of crowdsource that a little bit. Is like maybe put some experimental rules out in the Facebook group, let you guys chew on them, give me your feedback, and we can kind of refine them and work them into an expansion. Worked out really good with the artillery rules, right, Mike? I mean, when you did this, the new version, which I love the second version. Anyway, what do the tokens represent? Basically, all of the little markers like game effects, statuses, and stuff like that. So, for example, you'll notice there's a little one called Brace in there. That's for certain units are going to have the option of assuming a defensive posture, stretching the bound, using kind of period terms. I know that technically a pike block would need lots of dudes to work, but when you scale the numbers down, it's just kind of representing them going to more of a defensive posture, which makes them a little more ready to receive an attack. Also, too, is there are pavises in the game, or pavises, however you wish to pronounce it. So certain crossbowman unit will have the option of taking that upgrade, and you can brace, and like basically like represents them stabbing them into the ground if they have the spikes, or putting out the kickstand or whatever, and then they can move around like that, or shoot behind them, and they get a little bit of a bonus to shooting. So that's all that. And then again, I mentioned the ammo token. I think there's an ammo token for when you run your warbows, so you can put that on the unit and mark when that ammunition is expended.
Bonus to shoot saves, I think you mean, not shooting. For the pavises.
What did I say? Yes. Oh, pavises shoot save. Yes, no bonus to shoot. Yeah, it doesn't help you shoot.
Doesn't help you shoot. No.
No. I mean, you could throw the pavises, I guess.
Unless you threw a last minute weird change in there that I didn't catch, but okay.
That would be a fun rule, though. Like 4-inch range, you can throw your pavis, and if you hit your pavis, you can. I'm sure somebody in the comments right now is like, pavis, it's pronounced pavis, but I know I'm terrible at the pronunciation stuff. Are there any sources of media you can recommend for someone who is looking to get into the era, books, movies, TV show? Number one suggestion I keep making is check out the History of England podcast. David did the voiceover for the Kickstarter video. He's a really nice guy. He's got one of the best narrative podcasts out there. If you don't want to know everything that's ever happened in the history of everything, you can jump right to episode 100, 100 Years' War, Kickoff 100, and he takes you all the way through. Very, very good. It's all published already too, so you don't have to wait for anything. So it's already right there online, ready to go. I'm also including in the book a select bibliography as well as like some thank yous to some other YouTubers, so you can check out their material just to learn more about the period. I think somebody posted in a group a really good like 100 Years War in 8 minutes, which is really nice and stuff like that. There's also a pretty extensive timeline in the book. So it'll my goal with that was, obviously I'm not a historian. I'm not trying to give you the entire history of the 100 Years War, but I was trying to give you enough names, places, and stuff so that whatever catches your interest, you could dig deeper on that as well. Movies, they're all terrible. Oh, don't watch any of them. I actually haven't watched, is it The Hollow Crown? Which is not The Hollow Crown. Which is the one with Chris Pine? Anyway, the Robert the Bruce, where he plays Robert the Bruce. And I haven't watched that one yet. I've heard it's good. The King on Netflix, I is horrible. Henry V, I can't even deal with that one. Don't get me started on Braveheart, the movie I loved so much. And anyway,
sure. Let me yell something at Ray real quick. Hey Ray, could you share the Discord link on the chat? Somebody's asking about Discord. So yes, we have a Discord for Firelock game stuff in general, including Blooded Crowns. So
everybody's screaming Outlaw King at me. Yes, that's the one. I've heard it's very good because they actually, surprise, surprise, put color on people. I've seen pictures like, whoa, they actually had color back then. Amazing. So what else we got here?
Not covered in mud.
Yeah, that was cool. Oh, yeah, the Monty Python. How do you know he's a king? Anyway, how many types of ships do you have rules set aside for? So I think there was some contention of the people behind the scenes. There's the cockboat, which is basically the small little, just like a little version of the longboat. There's the cog, the Ballinger, the barge, and then I kind of used the term round ship to cover a 3-deck cog, just so that people weren't getting confused. Because I said, "You're running a cog?" "Yes, I'm running a cog." "No, I thought you said you're running a cog." "No, you're running a cog." They're all, and the terminology of this period makes the Age of Sail look like they were super well organized and had all of the ships perfectly categorized. I mean, they don't even know what a Ballinger looked like. I mean, the closest I could find was the conceptual sketch from Dr. Friel. So,
yeah. And we do similar stuff with Blood and Plunder ship names.
You have to, because it's just
Corvette, frigate. I mean, they all kind of work.
Yeah. But the goal was to give you as much variety as you have 2 oared vessels, you have 2 primarily sailing vessels, and you do get to do the castle tops or the top castle. You can add that to the ship and all that. Are you, or have you already going to do a video demo of the game? My goal is I was trying to film. I'm getting the table almost set up to do that. Apparently I'm really bad at grammar, so that's been tying up a lot of my time doing the last minute edits, because so as soon as I get that fully off my plate, my plan is to film some actual gameplay video. And we just lost Mike, I think. He's gone.
Am I gone?
Your video's gone, yeah.
You can hear me though?
I can hear you.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that.
Never played any of your games before. How many of those special dice I need for 2 players? Special dice. So fatigue, the fatigue dice you would need about usually 1 per unit. We tried to do the tokens so that if you're running a roughly, you have enough tokens for your archers and so on and so forth. I have a ton of them, so I'm probably a horrible person to ask that question exactly how many you need, but I say per player. So what do you say? Like you'd say like 5 to 10, Mike, to keep it, and then you might want a couple reload dice.
Yeah.
The crossbow reload. For the factions listed on the Kickstarter page, are there multiple lists or just 1 per faction? Do name commanders influence lists? Do factions have unique rules or abilities? Yeah, I tried to do, every faction has 3 lists except unaligned only has 2, but the one list is like so super flexible that you can really like tailor it. So if you wanted to do like, say, for Free Company leaning English, you could have some English archers in there alongside some crossbowmen and stuff like that. Or if you want to lean more French, you could have the Genoese crossbowmen mercenaries in there as well. The name commanders are basically, so the way it works is you have, when you pick a command unit, you'll pick a tier of command units. You'll have a knight banneret, a nobleman, or a magnate. And then legendary leaders replace the leader in one of those 3. So for example, Henry V, you kind of buy a magnate retinue, and he replaces the leader for an upgrade cost. And he comes with some special rules. And then each faction does have special rules. like one or two, just to kind of tailor the force a little bit. And then some of the lists have some special rules. Like for example, the English and excuse me, lists that kind of face each other both have hatred for each other. Will the rules work for War of the Rose? Okay, so or will they be later expansion? The War of the Rose is not specifically covered. You could do it. I don't see why not. I don't see why you couldn't use like the later lists, especially the unit. The way I kind of tried to do it is exactly the way Blood and Plunder does it. Is that every list it matches its contemporary, so assumes that they all kind of match up together. So if you run Joan of Arc against Edward the Black Prince, they're fine. And I use terminology like, so for example, you take the full harness upgrade for your armor. I recognize that, in the early wars of Scottish independence, that wasn't really a thing, but it reflects better quality armor and stuff like that. It's just using those period terms to kind of make it easier to communicate with other players, as well as just capture the flavor of the period. All right, that's all the questions I think that we had in the document, but I know that the chat was doing some stuff and I kind of lost track of it.
Yeah, so I could jump up to some Kickstarter questions here in the, if I could reopen this. Okay, there we go. Unfortunately, it looks like my video is just gone. I got a stupid spam call, and because I had to do this on my phone, thanks to being difficult. That's that. Anyway, I lost my place. I almost. Okay, so are there any plans to continue making STLs for Bloody Crown? So yeah, I answered that one. The answer is yes. If you missed it, but don't expect a ton, and probably not quickly. The next one, will the STL figures be purchasable as a 3D printed miniature for those without 3D printers? We are exploring that right now. So we're looking at what that looks like as for some short run things. I will say in the next week or so, we'll make an announcement on that, and we'll let you know. We might limit it to like the first 200 people or so, because we have some capabilities of printing here, but we have a lot of other things we're running at the same time. So I don't want it to impact anything that we already have to do. So, but I think that should be viable. But like I said, we'll let you know. The answer is tentatively yes, but we'll give you the details a little later on that. So, will there be a resin version of the ship for the miniatures? There will not. One of the so we considered that strongly for a while, but one of the issues really is that casting the types of ships that belong in this period is much more difficult. It requires a lot of parts and molds, and it would end up just being expensive for a relatively small ship. And the STLs are a good choice. There's also a bunch of laser cut kits out there you could get and such. Like I know our friends at Laser Dreamworks have one, and there's a few others out there. So there's some pretty good options already for ships. I think there's even some plastic kits. I think like Zvezda does a pretty good one that I've seen somebody post up. So there's options. So yeah, I did answer that one earlier as well. But yes, there most definitely will be. So especially for Blood and Plunder and Oaken Iron and the rest. We're just figuring out the way to do it and to do it correctly. So with minimal issues. So we'll get that as soon as we have news on that. This is kind of a trial run for some of that stuff. So we're gonna try to distribute this. We're more than likely be releasing these through my mini factory to distribute them to you all and see how that goes and try the process and see how you guys are able to print them all and all that. So we'll see how that goes from there. I'm pretty confident that that's going to go pretty smoothly. I don't foresee any issues. The test prints we've done here look good, so that should be all good. You got any questions caught up here, Eric?
I got a few. Just to clarify on the missile weapons, the way it's been playing out, this is Panzer Kaput. The way it's kind of been the armor, it depends on the unit. If you put some footmen out there and you just kind of let them get shot up, they're going to get eaten up pretty quick. But like some of your men at army units, especially your veterans, they
Yeah.
can withstand some pretty decent shots with that extra die, and with the resilient rule, they can weather the storm a little bit more. Obviously, like any other game, you're going to want to have a good balance of forces because you're going to want to soften, especially. I mean, as we know, like throughout the period, that was kind of always the French's um, challenge was how do you break up the English archers long enough for you to make contact with them and actually take them out. And so I didn't want to make it all about that the center of the game. So the English archers are relatively expensive, so it balances out pretty good. But there's certainly obviously some tactics. The tactics on either side are a little different, so which is nice.
Yeah. I will say I played on Sunday, and I played against a bunch of English archers playing the French,
How to
and it went. I thought I was going to win, but then the archers were not. My men at arms actually ended up getting chopped up by a bunch of. I just got overwhelmed by footmen. I broke
mm,
through. I killed a
yeah.
bunch of archers. It was great, but it didn't end well, unfortunately. I was doing really good
It's
the whole game. I had I had like I had two I had two I always want to say valor. I had two renown over him for the whole game. It's like turn two on, and then turn four he evens me up, and then just downhill from there. Anyway, go on with your next episode.
I think we already answered this, but do we have a favorite faction nation? I said I was English, and yeah now.
Mhm.
What other factions do you anticipate possibly releasing rules for in the future? And will expansions focus on geographic regions or specific wars? Yeah, War of the Roses, sieges, and intermixed in there. I'd like to drill down on the smaller areas, like give Burgundy some specific attention, and the Low Countries. Those are probably good things I could scoop up in another like expansion, maybe not necessarily a dedicated expansion. Um, and then of course the because that's a big part of the Hundred Years' War, but it's not directly related to the French English conflict. Is the Burgundy's Low Country issues because it always kind of pulled their resources away and stuff like that. Giving Brittany a little more attention. I know I had one of the community members reach out directly, who I believe is from Brittany, and was kind of like talking about how like I kind of group them under the French, which is you want to get like particular. You could see them; they were definitely had a lot of independence and everything like that. So I'd like to give them some love at some point as well. Crusades, I just saw a pop up. Somebody asked me Crusades. There's a little bit going on in the Middle East, and I might want to cover that, but I'd much rather cover the Northern Crusades in Eastern Europe first. I'd probably put them ahead of that. And the short list right now is I would probably put the War of the Roses ahead of the Italian Wars, but I would say like Sieges, War of the Roses, and then the Iberian Peninsula, and picking up because if I do the reconquest of Granada, I can kind of also fill in where like John of Gaunt went to try to claim the Castilian throne and pick up some of those English forces in the with the Portuguese and everything like that. Do the Hoblars shoot from horse or act more as mounted infantry? They do throw their javelins from horses. It's just with a pretty high range penalty, and they have a high shoot value to begin with. So it's more represents them coming up with like that was a tough one to work in. Kind of what I went with there is that they more than likely, from what I can gather, used a fletched javelin or fletched war dart with some type of assist. And from what I can understand, they were actually quite good at it. So, and short range, same thing with the jinetes. I didn't try to differentiate them too much. They'll also be able to use their javelins from horseback as well. Are the rules how to create your own leaders? No, not specifically, but again, you have those three tiers of leader or retinue, and then you can mount them or dismount them. And there's a couple of things you can tailor. You can add like a standard bearer, and that's actually a cool little difference too. Is you can add the standard bearer, and I think somebody asked a question about this, and so I think the rules specifically call it a banner. So the banner will
Mhm.
one of the things that's in there is you can actually when you have to do a fallback, you can fall back towards the banner instead of your deployment zone like you normally would have to. And what I've been doing from a modeling perspective is because you kind of like it's really hard to tell these guys apart, especially like a veteran man at arms versus a regular man at arms, your retinue. Is I typically would use, and unfortunately I don't have any within arm's reach. I've been using a banner bearer that's holding an arms like a noble's colors. So here, let me grab Irvingham. So like use something like this for the leaders unit to signify the leaders unit, and then do something like with the forked banner. Hold on, stand by. I'll grab one real quick. This will work. Okay, so use the use the arms to mark your leader unit. Then use, if you want to do like a standard or a banner, like with a special rule character, use like the this is Henry V's banner. Use that for that upgrade. And then if you have like a veteran unit, just throw a standard or a banner on them that like a saint banner. So this is like the Saltier, or you could do like the Cross of St. George or the Cross of St. Denis and stuff like that.
Drew's correcting you in the chat.
What do you say?
Banner is the special rule. Banner bearer is the character upgrade.
Thank you. And I can't remember because we changed it, because I think I changed it because standard was mixing with something else, and it was because so we went with banner. I think standard is probably a more correct term, but I went with banner because it's clearer in the rules. Mm-hmm. But then he would know.
Yeah.
he'd also hopefully he's not in the chat talking about how bad my English is. All right, I think I'm caught up on the questions. Now I'm scrolling back through again.
Okay.
Did you pick up anything, Mike?
Nothing that you didn't cover.
The Blunder Monkey. I think it was Neil and he suggested the same thing.
We don't need to talk about that. You don't need to.
Well, I thought it was more.
You just skip that question.
It's more period correct to do. I think to do the bunny.
Mm-hmm, of course. So there's some questions here that I think Ray may have added to the chat. So, okay. Let me see. Are you? They've talked about. I think you answered this one. A demo video of the game.
Working on it. Hopefully, I'll have something. What's next weekend? Next weekend, I'm preparing for HurricCon. It's not HurricCon, right? I have one more weekend. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna try to do something in the next week or so.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, we may give you a mediocre cell phone video from HurricCon. So, and we'll go through Eric's explanations. So, you'll get something. You'll get something. Let's see. Never played any of your games before. How many of those special dice would I need for 2 players? So you don't need any of the dice. Those are just helpful. They're helpful tools. The punch board token that we're having there are going to have the fatigue and all those counters that you'll need for the game. What's really nice with the dice is that it's just less clutter on the table, and if you're playing on ships especially, it's much easier to pick them up in and out of the ship. But typically you need 1 per unit per side is a good side, so is a good amount. So if you're typically going to run, I usually run 5 or 6 units. A really big game might have 10, but so a good 12, like the amount you get in a pack, is typically enough for your average game. But second one never hurts. What else? For faction lists, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say real quick for the cards. If you've never seen a deck of the cards, what's nice about the official cards is when you do initiative, it gives you all of the lists. It's right there on the card. How many actions the dip based on the skill level, as well as the pips to see who goes first.
Right.
So if you've never seen that, that's very helpful. And I've been using this. Obviously, it's St. George's Cross. So great.
I think you cut out there, at least for me. Say that again.
Oh, I say the Saint. Some of the decks already work really well because, like, this is the Blood and Plunder St. George's Cross. It's the same flag. It's good for the English.
Right. So somebody asked for the faction list, are there multiple lists or just 1 per faction? Do named characters influence lists? Do factions have unique rules or abilities?
I think I answered that one. You were trying to figure out why you were blacking out, but yeah, it's
Okay, that's probably why. I
three
know I've missed
rough.
two or three.
And I do have an amendment. I think Spain only has two lists as well because it's drilled down on
I think they do, yeah.
the
Mhm.
Castilian Civil War. So it's basically Pedro versus Enrique.
So here's one. Are there any Blood and Pigment or Firelock Games painting or global campaigns planned following release? That would not for us necessarily, although that would be awesome. But that's a question for the Blood and Pigment guys. And Dead Man's Chest is running a lot of stuff on this, so you could go follow them as well. And any of the community channels and just see, if there's enough interest, I'm sure they'd be interested in doing it. I don't think it would tie in with the with the Summer of Plunder or anything like that directly, but you never know, right?
We will, and I
Eric
think there
will
was
probably volunteer to run one, a year-long campaign online, very detailed.
100%.
Yeah.
Send your game results to Mike at Firelock Games. Somebody did ask about Galaglass. I do have a Galaglass unit that's in the Scottish lists, and that actually dovetails with a question that I was asked. That was asked on one of the Facebook threads, and it asked: "Is the Scottish? This is Spud Newkman asked if are Scottish forces exclusively during the Wars of the Bruce, or does their roster extend into the later into the period?" Absolutely, all the way to the continent. One of the Scottish legendary leaders is Darnley, who was basically he established what would eventually become the I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it in French, but the Scottish Guards. So you have what I tried to do is pick like one. I didn't do perfect with this, but like for example, Scots I did really good. So you have Robert the Bruce, then you have Douglas the second Earl, and then you have Darnley, who is I think it's Darnley. It's very. But he's like later in the period. He was the one that was there roughly right before Joan of Arc came onto the scene, and he kind of sees the Scots through their big Verneuil, whatever, where they got kind of mostly decimated. I think that I'm digging, but I'm not seeing anything. Did we answer about Force Builder? Did you already answer that question? Are we going to do there's a plans for a Force Builder?
I missed that one. I would love to. We don't have any plans for right now. Not enough resources to dedicate toward that. Although that would be excellent. I mean, I'm sure if somebody's, we have an excellent community, and I'm sure there's a very good chance somebody will probably end up doing something. Worst case scenario, something on Battlescribe or something like that. So like they have for Blood and Valor. But yeah, to host and run a builder for every game, and because we have a lot more games planned on coming out, would be a humongous amount of resources that is just unfortunately impractical. But yeah, you never know. Hopefully somebody does one. But
another online question. This one's probably for me. Is there a campaign system in the game? If so, can you touch on how it works? There is not right now. That's definitely expansion material. I would love to see that included at some point. I would probably construct it around a chevauchée, in the sense that so you could have like an attacking force and a defending force, and then have because what I kind of have bounced around my head is I think Renown is a great I think it would make a really good campaign currency.
mm-hmm. Right. Okay, so we got Monley asks, newbie here, wanted to ask if this game uses square around bases. Also, how many cards sets do I need for 2 players? I plan on getting this for me and my brother only. So that's an easy one. So it doesn't matter. You could use either. It's just I would not go bigger than 25 millimeter. But if you're both using the same size bases, doesn't really matter. It's going to limit you on ships if you go real big. So you want to stay smaller. 20 millimeters ideal, but 25s are okay. One card deck is enough for 2 players. Eric actually wrote it in that you could split a deck if you so desired, but definitely, at least in my opinion, works better with 2. So
Joseph Forrester said you didn't answer my book question. That's correct, Joseph. I did not.
Correct. You did answer it. You actually answered it without answering it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so no, it's a good question. Honestly, I think the Osprey book by Dr. Curry is a good one, and I'm trying to see if I have it handy. It's got like a red cover. Okay, I owe you guys an answer on that one. I owe that one for you. I'll try to post this to the Facebook group. But if you just look at Osprey, it's like called The 100 Years' War cryptically, and it's by Dr. Curry.
Didn't you already post it, or am I just thinking of the one in the book?
I think it's probably the one in the book. I may have, or somebody else posted it. It's really thin. Yeah, and it's got it's not to toot my own horn, okay, but the book timeline is pretty good. I actually ran it by David Crowther of the History of England podcast. He kind of sprinkled a few things on there, and he kind of gave me some really good guidance on how to tweak it. But it's pretty good. So it's yeah. I mean, it hits I think a good depth. So that would actually be a good place to start. But if you're going to look specifically at a book, Dr. Curry's book is really good. Generally speaking, they start to split by period or by they have like phases. I think there's like technically, depending on who you ask, is like 2 or 3 phases of the war. I think a good for the later one, the book. I think I posted the one. I think the one you might be thinking of, Mike, because I posted about Joan of Arc, the book. I posted a book link for that, and that one's a phenomenal book about her. And then, of course, if you're looking for the 14th century, you can do much better than. And her name just escaped. The Calamitous. I can see the picture of the book. Distant Mirror is a really good book as well.
Well, Joseph is already upset about the offerings you've given him. So as we figured, it wasn't good enough. You tried, but this is a good question here, and I think I know the answer. I think I know your answer. I know my answer. I think I know your answer, but I'll let you answer it. My command is currently multi-based. Should I separate them? Banners and leaders on one base. Also, any thoughts on jousting
rules? I couldn't get the jousting rules past legal, so there's no so unfortunately you have to break ties with a die roll. It's if you're playing I'm gonna leave it up to a lot of decisions. If you're playing me and you have all your guys on one base and you use casualty markers, you're not going to offend me at all. It's going to affect some of the contact. You might get. It's kind of hard to ignore part of the stand. So, like if you're getting charged and stuff, it could affect some of the distances there. In a tournament, I wouldn't recommend it because it could get really confusing and some people could exploit it. But I'm more of a narrative player. I'm not really a big competitive player anymore. I used to play competitively, and I certainly structured the rules so that they would support competitive play in tournament. And who knows, maybe I'll run a tournament at some point. But like I said, if you're playing me, I'm not going to. I don't know what Mike's answer to that question is, but I wouldn't complain too much. I'd be like, whatever, just put a casualty marker on it.
Yep, that's what I would do. And really, the situations where I've seen people play with. We had somebody at a tournament do that. They brought their models multi-based for all their units, and they were just in 4-man blocks. It didn't really have any significant effect on the game. It's pretty rare this circumstance where it's going to be a problem. Mostly, it's a detriment to you, to you as the player, as it just makes it more difficult for you to take maximum advantage of cover and things like that. But, but other than that, it's not a huge deal.
So there's some there's some trash talking in the comments. Krista Hansen says, scared to do a gameplay video because he knows I will demolish him. Facts.
Accurate trash talking, apparently.
Yeah, I haven't beat her yet. It's like, which I don't know. Probably a wise decision on my part, and believe she won all of them fair and square. So that's good.
All right, so we're coming up on an hour here. I know you're limited on time, but we can maybe take a few more questions if anybody has anything that we're missing. Any last minute questions? Throw them into the chat now.
She just keeps going. Like it's gonna be awkward when I walk out of the room. But I'm surprised nobody's asked why I'm the only only designer on or developer for Firelock that can't grow a beard, but that's true. It's
Mhm.
facts. I just have to deal with it.
Yep. All right. Well, it looks like that's probably going to be it. So, if you have any other questions, of course, go to our Kickstarter page and go ahead and drop a comment. Go to our Facebook page, send us an email, support@firelockgames.com. Any of those ways you can reach us. Um, so, thank you guys so much for stopping by and participating. And we are excited for the campaign, and it's doing much better than we anticipated, which is always great. I mean, we're we're doing super well. We got one. Somebody asking one last question. Who will answer? What an average size of games?
I've been running per player, easily managed 150 to 200 points. I ran a one convention up to 250 points, which is about 30 odd models, give or take aside,
Mhm.
and it was pretty manageable.
Yeah,
And that was for players that never played before.
we've typically been doing between. We did a lot of smaller games play surprisingly well with. I think it's about 15 aside. Um,
Mhm.
Played better than I thought. It was good games under an hour. Um, and but on average probably 20, 30. Yeah, probably about right. So
And
all right.
global campaigns, I don't have any plans to do a global campaign, but I will certainly support the effort to do so. Hint, hint. Because I know the summer of plunder is taken care of, but winter campaign, just saying, like, what are you doing the rest of the year?
That's a good
Put it
point.
out there.
I know Joseph definitely has nothing else. I know he just sleeps for the rest of the year. So he like hibernates
He,
like a bear. So
he's only reading thin books anyway, so it's not like he's like
no,
spending all this time studying.
he's not reading thin books. That's the
Oh,
problem.
I misread that. Okay. Oh,
He was offended by your thin book suggestion.
oh, good point. Okay, sorry, I missed classes. But I would like to just say thanks to everyone. Like I say, it's going more than I could possibly, better than I could possibly imagine. I really appreciate everybody's support, all the positive comments, and yeah, just hope you guys enjoy the game once it's fully in your hands. And like Mike said, if you have any questions, I'm accessible, so just reach out.
You got it. All right, guys. Well, that's gonna do it. Thank you so much for participating. Sorry, my camera messed up in the middle of the thing, but hey, what are you gonna do? Um, so thanks so much for participating, and hope you guys all have a great day. And we're looking forward to the campaign ending and getting you all playing it. Have a good night.
Game well.